What's up, y'all? This is Hammer here again, back with another video. And today we're going to be talking about Asians. We're going to do a deep dive into Asian Americans, the complex history, and this idea of anti Asian hate and just the truths, the falsehoods, and the in between. Now, ever since the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Actually, before the COVID 19 pandemic, right? Asians have had this identity, this image of being the model minority. I remember growing up and how, whenever white people wanted to talk about, the perfect minority group, they would say, well, why can't y'all be more like these Asians, right? Asians became like the model minorities, the quote unquote perfect, minority group, right? And that was their image for a long time. In fact, whenever black folks will talk about, the problems, whenever black folks talk about struggles they will face, the things they would, the racism, white people will be very quick to say, well, if it's so bad, then what about the Asians? Why are they doing so good? So, before COVID-19, Asians were essentially portrayed as a model minority group, right? After COVID-19, a lot of white people started to blame COVID-19 on Asians. And so they started to face immense amount of racism from whites. Folks, calling it the Chinese virus. I mean, it was crazy. I'm like, I remember during that time period, I mean, if you were an Asian person, you were getting hard. I literally will see in real life how an Asian will walk into a store and white folks will essentially move. So it was really bad. But see, the thing is, when you start to see Asians really start, when you start to see whites really sort of go at Asians during COVID-19 because they hit the lockdowns, they hit everything, and they blame Asians for it. Asians started talking about anti-Asian hate, right? Oh, we're getting all this hatred, we're getting all this attack. That's okay, yeah, fine to talk about it. But what got me angry is they wanted to flip it and say it's black folks that are doing all the anti-Asian hate. And I was like, what? Because when you pull up the stats around the FBI, we used the data, right? The vast majority of the perpetrators when it comes to anti-Asian hate are actually white. But yet when you go on social media and when you look at the anti-Asian hate organizations, they always portray black folks as the face of anti-Asian hate, right? And they did this for a very long time until they were able to get the anti-Asian hate crime bill through, right? And the reason why that got me angry too is because once again, Black Americans literally had a whole protest during the summer in regards to Black Lives Matter, police brutality. They could not get police reform through Congress, but yet Asians, right, frame Black folks as a face of anti-Asian hate, and yet are able to get an anti-Asian hate crime bill, even though the stats show that most of the anti-Asian hate crime is coming from whites. But yet, despite this, right, we have a recent story, right, recent event, in which you had a shooting, right, that was done targeting Asians, right? And of course, when it first happened, they were saying, oh my God, it's anti-Asian hate, right? Well, when the shooting happened afterwards, we find out that the shooter is actually an Asian man, right? And of course, the Asian community is silent about this and they don't want to talk about it. And I believe I know why. But before I get into that, let's get into the video.
There is an uneasy tension in Monterey Park right now, a stunned silence. Businesses are open, people come and go, but nothing is normal here.
There's just profound sadness and grief and pain.
11 killed after police say 72-year-old Hugh Cantren.
Yeah. So when the shooting first happened, they were saying it was anti-Asian hate. But when we actually started to dig deeper, we found out that it's actually an Asian dude that did it. And they were very quiet. And I was like, but wait a minute. You guys were framing in the media that black folks were the ones that were doing all this anti-Asian hate crime. And we find out that, hey, the stats were correct, right? Most of the time, most of the anti-Asian hate crime going towards Asians is not coming from black folks. So why did you guys frame black people as perpetrators? And I think the answer is very clear. The reason is very clear, right? For most of America's history, right, Asians were not viewed as a model minority. In fact, when Asians first started to, when Asians first started to quote unquote immigrate here in America, they were viewed as low income workers. Right. In fact, you literally had like the Chinese Exclusion Act, right, trying to block Chinese immigrants coming from the United States. So the vast majority of America's history, Asians essentially were viewed as like, lower class, they were discriminated. I'm like the whole idea of the yellow peril. I'm like, what are we talking about here? Like for most of the time here in America, they were heavily discriminated against, right? Up until the Japanese internment camps. It wasn't until after civil rights and after World War II that America started to import more educated, right, high income earning Asians. And so this completely changed the demographics of Asians in America. Because before that, most Asians that were immigrating to the U.S. were mainly laborers, right? Low skilled workers. But then after civil rights, after World War II, they started to import more Asians that were educated, high income earners, which changed the population of Asian Americans from being mainly, laborers, low income workers to being highly educated, high income workers, right? And as a way to quote unquote, fight back or quote unquote delegitimize many of the racism claims that were coming from Black Americans. Remember, guys, right? Because remember, Black Americans were making the claim that America is fundamentally racist and is white first. And so it became in the incentive of the white majority to essentially position Asians as being the outlier group. So by importing more educated, high earning income Asians, by essentially using them as a buffer class and putting them in essentially, good positions, good paying jobs, elevating them, you could then use Asians, right, as a buffer to essentially attack any argument of racism. So whenever a Black person said, well, there's all systemic racism, I said, well, what about the Asians? But that's disingenuous because before World War II and before civil rights, Asians were essentially low income and they were in many ways viewed were very many ways discriminated against. Right? You guys are the ones that took Asian Americans and made them into a buffer class and elevated them over Black Americans so you can then use them, right, as a proxy to attack Black folks. Okay? And so Asians are very well aware of this. They understand. Look, Asian people in America, Asian Americans are not dumb. They very much understand, right, that the only reason that white people don't go at them the way they go at Black folks, right, is because Asians essentially have been positioned, right, as a proxy that can be used to delegitimize many of the points that Black Americans make. And so Asians know that, hey, if they were to ever lose the support, right, and the love and the buffer class status that white folks gave them, the fear is they will start targeting them the same way they target Blacks. And so that's the reason why, even though the vast majority of the anti-Asian hate crimes were coming from white people against Asians, they knew, hey, we can't, call out white folks because the fear is they'll take away our buffer class privileges. So the best thing for us to do is to essentially frame Black people as the perpetrators so that, we will be able, because by framing Black people as the main perpetrators of anti-Asian hate, what this will do is it would essentially allow us to keep our buffer class privileges and to further separate ourselves from Blacks who essentially are the underclass. And also will allow us to not alienate the white majority. Okay? And so when you understand this, then you understand why all these groups, especially Asians, are moving the way they do. They're not dumb. They know that Black folks in America are the most targeted and are essentially the buffer class. And they know that Black people in America are the most targeted and are essentially the underclass. Okay? They know this. And so as a result, they do whatever they can to separate themselves and to distance themselves from Black folks because they know, hey, everything they have in America, all the stuff they can do is because one, they're not black, and two, they're essentially put in the buffer class status. But if they were to be viewed as being much more aligned with black folks, the fear is white Americans will take away the buffer class status and will start going at them the way they go at black folks. And so this is why they be able to do. And so you end up in a situation where they'll they you end up in a situation where they will try to frame black people as the face of anti-Asian hate, even though the majority of the anti-hate crimes are white, and then we have a mass shooting and the shooter's Asian. It's funny. Let's keep going.
Opened fire inside Stardance studio. 20 minutes later, witnesses say he showed up at a second dance hall, confronted at the door by 26-year-old Brandon Say, who shared details on Good Morning America.
I realized I needed to get the weapon away from him. I needed to take this weapon, disarm him, or else everybody would have died.
On the run for hours, police closed in on Trump inside his van Sunday afternoon. Police say they heard a single shot, then found the suspect slumped over the steering wheel dead from a self-inflicted gunshot. Overnight, investigators searched Tran's home in Hemet, 80 miles east of the murder scene.
The public wants answers. You want answers. I want answers. And that will only come from an investigation.
While on the first day of the Lunar New Year, so many in this community struggle to deal with the attack.
Lunar New Year sets a precedent for the rest of the year, so you're supposed to celebrate that year.
Instead, this year, they mourn unprecedented, overwhelming loss. Jay Gray, NBC News, Monterey Park, California.
Yeah, and so, they literally spend the entire anti-Asian hate movement talking about how black folks were the ones attacking them, even though it was clear that it was many white people. The stats showed this. And so now that you have, an Asian, go in there and essentially gutting down the Asians, now all of a sudden now they're being required. But once again, a lot of black people ask themselves, why is it that all these non-black groups will, attack black folk in the black diaspora? In other words, why all of these non-black groups attack black people, even though black people have done nothing to them? And by the way, it's not just here in America, right? Because even black Africans, when they will go to China, they will get treated like shit. But the quote unquote white Anglo-Saxon gets loved. And it's is this thing where why is that all across the world? All across the world, black people are essentially treated the worst, and yet whites are treated the best. Even though black folks have done nothing to them. Well, the answer is clear. You were viewed at the bottom of the hierarchy, white people are viewed at the top of the hierarchy. And so for most of these non-black people, non-white folks, they believe that, hey, although you may not have done nothing to them, they do not want to be associated with you because they do not want to be associated with your low caste status. They do not want to be associated with a group of people that is viewed at the bottom. And although white people have fucked them over, because white people at the top, they want to be associated with them. They want to have that quote unquote, top tier, top caste status. They want to be with the whites because they view the whites as being superior. They view the whites being on the top. And the same thing applies in America. They view black Americans as the underclass, and so they will attack you as much as possible to separate themselves, right, from your underclass status. Even though you've done nothing to them, because they don't want to be associated with a group that they view as being at the bottom in America, they will target you. And I think once you understand that, then you understand why all these non-black folks behave the way they do. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and leave now. Tell me what y'all think about the video. Make sure you like and subscribe. Hammer out.